Welcome, everybody, to Soul Food Coffee House on this first Wednesday of, what month are we in now, November? Thank you, thank you. And if it's the first Wednesday of November, that must mean that tonight we are preempting our regular Astrology Night broadcast in favor of Rick Levine actually being here, back from Bali, where he was partying like an astrologer, I guess. So let's welcome Rick Levine for this month's Astrology Night.
Thank you, Kevin. So here we are once again at Soul Food Coffee House in Redmond, Washington. It's the first Wednesday night of the month. Sorry I couldn't make it last month. I was busy in the tropics. But I understand that those of you who showed up last month had the recorded version of the astrology afternoon that we did in the jungle of Bali. And we have 3 people here who are actually with us in Bali. Nice to see you guys again, like a little reunion. Bali was wonderful. And one of the things that I brought back from Bali, can we get a camera, is this. So my second week out of 6 weeks, thank you. The Cancer Moon needs those awes. The second week out of 6 weeks in Bali, I hurt my foot enough to have it x-rayed, and it showed up fine. And so I thought it was a strain, and so I worked the hell out of it for 6 weeks and came home, was here overnight, and went to California and walked on the beach and worked the hell out of it for another week and came home, and on Friday I had it x-rayed, and so I've been walking around on a broken foot for 6 weeks. So I got it all fixed up now. Anyhow, that's my my Mercury retrograde in Bali story, I guess. But on to more important things. We are at the beginning of November 2015, and we have some stuff to talk about. It's been a pretty crazy ride over these last several months, and I want to say again, and you will hear me say this again and again, for all of those astrologers who have said that the Uranus-Pluto square, which was in and out of phase 7 times from 2013 through 2015, and many people say began doing its work as early as 2010 or 2011, it ain't over. And a lot of if anybody's cell phone rings, I get the right to answer it. Oh, wait, it's Julie's, the videographer. You're excused. Let it ring. Anyhow, back to the Uranus-Pluto square. Even though it is technically over, it is technically a done deal, the square is finished. The fact of the matter is that the energy is still resonating, and as planets move through the mid-cardinal signs, that would be the mid-signs of Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, we get resonating energy back to that Uranus-Pluto square. So it ain't over till it's over, and it'll probably be with us for another couple of years for sure. And right now we still have planets moving through Libra, and later this year we'll have planets moving through mid-Capricorn. So we get that energy again and again and again. Before I move into the material of the month, I would like to share 2 things with you. One is that I will be teaching in Austin, Texas. For those of you here at Soul Food tonight, it's probably out of your range of weekend evening travel. But on the internet, for those of you who live in the Austin area, I will be doing a Friday night lecture entitled Peering into the Mind of God. And I will be doing an all-day workshop on Saturday entitled 12 Steps to Better Chart Readings, or 12 Practical Steps to Better Chart Readings. And then on Sunday, I'll be doing an all-day workshop interpreting outer planet transits in the real world. You can attend any one of the 3 of these, any 2, and I understand there is a package deal for all 3. You can go astrologyaustin.org. That's Austin, Texas, astrologyaustin.org, and you can find it there. That's one event. That's in November. And then in January, I will be doing, sorry about that. I will be doing the annual year ahead retreat, Conscious Creation with Astrology at Brighton Bush Hot Springs. This will be the weekend of January 8th, 9th, and 10th. This is in the central part of Oregon, up in the mountains and the Cascades, the old-growth forest, surrounded by magical national forest. It's about an hour into the hills outside of Salem, Oregon, which is about an hour south of Portland, Oregon. And it's a fun weekend. We do kind of the same setting that we do here at Soul Foods every month. We look at the month ahead. At Brighton Bush, we look at the year ahead. And instead of just picking a few charts to look at, as we do here at Soul Food during the second part, you internet folks are excluded from that part. But at Brighton Bush, we actually look at the chart of every attendee. There's usually about 15 to 25 people. It's a small group. It's a lot of fun. The hot springs there are pretty magical. The food is great. It's off the grid. There's no cell phones or internet. And if you're interested in pursuing that, go to Brighton Bush. That's BREITEN Bush, BrightonBush.com. And that's the first weekend in January. It's a way of getting oriented astrologically to the year ahead. Okay, done and done. We have a month coming up. The month that's coming up, November, is interesting to me because when Jeff and I did this evening event for 7 years, we always used to laugh at one or the other person saying, next month, it's an incredible month. And then the other person would say, you always say that. Well, next month is not an incredible month, which makes it incredible. And it's not that nothing happens. Oh, I can hear my English teacher and my editor saying, that's a double negative. It's not that nothing happens, but it's correct. It's not that, I can't do it any other way. Someone help me. It's not that a lot of things aren't. It's still a negative. Anyhow, you know what I mean. It's not that nothing happens next month. It's just that the things that are happening next month are not in the same level, in the same proportion of powerfulness as some of the things in the month before. I mean, we still have planets changing signs. We have planets making aspects with other planets. We have a new moon and a full moon, as we do every month. We will talk about these. But we don't have any major significant events until we push toward the end of the month. And we get one that's hard to put our finger on, but I think it actually has more importance than we might notice. And what I'm talking about is, first of all, let's bring this up to date. We're looking at September here, and we're going to go 11-4. That looks more like now. What I'm talking about, one of the things that this month leads up to involves a square that will set into motion a lot of the stuff that's going on over the year ahead, and it's a square between Saturn and Neptune. So we have Saturn here at 4 degrees of Sagittarius. For those of you who remember over the past few months and over the past year, Saturn, which spends about two and a half years in each sign, had been moving through Scorpio. It touched into Sagittarius. It backed into Scorpio, and now it's solidly in Sagittarius, where it will be for the next couple of years. So all of you, how many Scorpios do we have here? Scorpio suns, moons, ascendants. Okay, so for all of you who for the past year or so have been saying some version of, in answer to the question, how's your life? It sucks. It doesn't suck anymore. It's now the Sagittarians' turn. And of course, as we know, Sagittarians don't suck as good as Scorpios do. Look, Scorpio is a heavyweight sign. Scorpio knows how to get down and dirty. Scorpio is about the intensity. It's about the hidden parts of the cycle. It's about power. And to some extent, we have some Scorpio issues cooking because the sun is in Scorpio. We just experienced Halloween, which is the Scorpio holiday when the veil is thinner between this world and other worlds, and the energies from the other side kind of slip through a little bit, and we make childish games out of it, as we do for a lot of important things. But the fact of the matter is that the ghosts and goblins and disincarnate beings and spirit guides and ancestors and all the disincarnate consciousness entities are a little bit more likely this time of year to come peering through. And when Saturn was moving through Scorpio, we had a lot of that heavyweight energy going on. This time of year, when the sun moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius, even though we're moving closer to winter, the energies lighten up a little bit. I noticed that around Halloween, at least in the northern climes, often we get those days when those intense storms come in and the pretty Libran energy of all the flowers so bright on all the trees. Everything looks so delicately hung in the balance as that perfect Indian summer Libra day. And then Scorpio hits and the leaves die. They wither. They're still on the trees, though, until that intense wet rain. Well, isn't all rain wet? Until that rain comes through and that cold wind blows. And all of a sudden, those leaves are not so pretty. And it's like, ew. But something magical happens in Scorpio because it's the beginning of the hidden part of the cycle. Something after the magical prettiness of Libra and before the spring when the energy is reborn, something happens in that 5-6 month period of time that allows what appears to die to be reborn. And that's the magic of the essence of Scorpio. So Scorpio is heavy and intense and powerful and mysterious, and it's the time of year that in the northern climates in ancient times, when the crops were in and the cold weather was coming and it was kind of measured. It's the opposite sign to Taurus, which is about what we have. And in Scorpio, it's not about only what we have, it's about what we shared and what we all have. And at that time of year, often it was decided which of the livestock would be fed and kept alive over the winter and which would be killed. And although it's a bit alien to us, it was also decided which of the humans would be continued to be fed and which ones might go during that season. And so there was kind of this coming to terms with the endings and with the mystery when the sun moves through Scorpio every year. But by the time we get to Sagittarius, and the sun moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius on November 22nd, by the time we get from Scorpio to Sagittarius, the holiday changes from Halloween, all that mysterious, scary shit coming through, to Thanksgiving. It's all good. We came from a foreign country and we were taken care of by people who fed us and taught us how to popcorn and cook turkeys and all these wonderful things. And we get together and we celebrate the thanks that we have for living such great and bountiful lives. And we share fellowship. And it's a Sagittarian holiday. And like all Sagittarian things, it's built on bullshit. Well, not completely bullshit, but at least perhaps what might be an untruth. In other words, Sagittarius takes even the deepest, darkest, most mysterious, most horrific things, and it makes them look good. And the energy, the weather energy around Sagittarius, around Thanksgiving, is often different than Halloween, when it's dark and dreary, and somehow by the time Thanksgiving happens, all the leaves are gone. And the sun comes out, and you can see forever. Do you know what I'm talking about? That kind of clear late November, December day when it doesn't feel all hung in. The leaves are no longer in the way. And Sagittarius is about that vision of being able to go far, see far, make long-distance visions, plans, ideas. It's traveling from one part of the world to the other part of the world physically, and it's also imagining the potential of what happens when the mind moves from one place to another. Astrologically, not only is long-distance travel an issue of Sagittarius, so is higher education. What do the two have in common? They're both about going somewhere far away. Do you know someone in a PhD program? It's a very different commitment than going to the 7-Eleven and picking up some, juice in the morning. That's like going to school for the day. There's this it's the opposite signs of Sagittarius to Gemini. In Gemini, it's a thinking process. It's back and forth. It's that everyday learning. It's commuting to work back and forth. That's a Gemini thing. It's about short trips and fast back and forth. It's mercurial. But the opposite sign, Sagittarius, is long distance travel. It's not about going from here to Tacoma and back 3 times a week. It's about going from here to Bali once a year and staying there for a month or 2 or 3 or forever. Because when you go on a long-distance journey, it's long enough that the journey takes on meaning itself almost as much as, or maybe even more than where you're going. So the Sagittarian might spend his or her whole life about getting a higher, degree, an education degree, or going on a safari to Africa. They may never get the degree or go to Africa, but it may determine the course of their life because there's a journey involved, and the journey takes on its own fabric. So, bringing this back to this time of year, when the energy is switching from Halloween to Thanksgiving. And incidentally, do you know Thanksgiving, as the holidays are so astrological? When people say, I don't believe in astrology, do you? I go, so you don't use a calendar and you don't celebrate holidays? Okay, whatever. Thanksgiving, the days of the week are associated with the planets. Moon Day, Sunday, duh. And then if you go to the Latin or to the Romantic languages, you have Mars Day, Mercury Day, Venus Day, Venedi, Mercuri, Jupiter's Day, which is what day of the week? And why do we call it Thor's Day instead of Jupiter's Day? Well, because Thor is the Norwegian version, and a lot of English comes from Norwegian. Same with Friday, Freya, Venus, Venede. But Thor's Day, or Jupiter's Day, is the planet Jupiter, and astrologically, every planet relates to a sign, every sign relates to a planet, right? So what's the planet that relates to the sign of Sagittarius? Jupiter. We celebrate Thanksgiving Day in the United States of America on the first Jupiter Day, Thursday, Thor's Day, once the sun moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius. Can you make this shit up this good? I mean, it's like one of the fascinating things about being an astrologer is that if I were just to make up stuff to validate what it was that I thought was important, I couldn't make it up this good. Thanksgiving is the first Jupiter's Day once the sun moves into Sagittarius, and we celebrate coming from a foreign land, and we celebrate thanks and bounty. These are Sagittarian concepts. Fellowship. Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's about high-level idealism and that sense of taking the high road, the moral high ground, feeding a people because they're hungry, whether or not they're enemies and they're going to kill us. Whatever. I'm sometimes I sometimes am humored by people talking about how one can act in the moment to change what's ahead, but we can't change the past because the past is fixed. And that's just a crock of baloney, because the past is as fluid and as changeable as the future. And anyone who doesn't agree with me, just think about what you thought of Thanksgiving and or Columbus when you were a kid compared to what you know now, or compared to what we all know now. And it doesn't take away the higher level of meaning of what Thanksgiving can be, or what we might celebrate in that Sagittarian kind of wanting to go to a place of fellowship and love and giving thanks and so on. But the fact of the matter is that the picture isn't as pretty as we once thought it was, and the past changes. Anyone ever been to a therapist in your life ever? What's therapy about? It's about changing your past, which in fact changes the present moment. So this whole thing of time is a bit of a little peculiar thing. And yet, when the sun moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius, our vision goes from the past to the future. We go from water, which is always holding on to something in the past. Water is astrologically emotions, feelings, to fire, which is in the moment. Now, let's come back to where I started here, which was the main event for the month, even though it doesn't occur exactly till the end of the month, and it occurs on and off over 2016, and that is the fact that Sagittarius, which has been for the last couple, 2.5, 3 years, in Scorpio, weighing down that serious part of our lives, helping us deal with things that were pushed down in denial under the covers, so to speak, and bringing some of these things up, working on them so that they didn't hold us back. And now, as Saturn moves into Sagittarius, it's almost like it's almost like we're required to look ahead. But in looking ahead, it's not just blindly running ahead, it's making a Saturnian solid plan for the future. You see, Saturn is karma. Saturn is you get what you deserve. Saturn is Satan. And in the Judeo-Christian tradition, because we were born of original sin, we get what we deserve, but it's always not good because we were born of original sin. Saturn, Satan, same word etymologically. Astrologically, Saturn isn't necessarily bad. It's just you get what you deserve. You work for it. It's karma. It's what happens is based upon what's already happened. Grant Louis, the very well-known astrologer who wrote in the 1940s and 1950s, a retired English professor from Dartmouth College, said that prophecy was simply looking back and marking points on a trajectory and taking that trajectory into the future. And as astrologers, that's all we do. We just have more points than some people have because we're looking at cycles or rhythms that many people don't notice because although we see the cycle of seasons, we don't necessarily see the cycles of Saturn as points, although we see them in our lives. We all know that over 30 and under 30 are different. If you're under 30, you never trust anyone. You don't trust anyone over 30. If you're over 30, even if you have friends under 30, and even if they're cool and they're mature, they're still under 30. They haven't grown up yet. So that Saturn cycle is a 30-year cycle. And people might know that, but astrologers know what it's based on and therefore can look at these points and make these trajectories to look into the future. So we have Saturn having moved from Scorpio into Sagittarius. Saturn is a 30-year cycle. It spends about 2.5 years in a sign. Through 2015, the end of 2015, and on into 2016, Saturn moves direct and retrograde and direct and makes a square. You can see this fat line here already. It's already within 2.5 degrees of being exact. Saturn, the planet of constriction, of reality. Saturn, the tester. Saturn, the planet of authority and rules. Saturn, the planet of you get what you deserve, is making a 90-degree conflictive square with Neptune, the planet of, Neptune dissolves the hard edges of Saturn. You know, Neptune is alcohol. Neptune is you drink and you go, huh? Neptune takes a stop sign, and you drink enough Neptune, alcohol, and the stop sign says, slow down a bit if you wanna. Neptune takes those limits and those boundaries and it fuzzes them out. So Neptune's job is to make reality seem not as real, which is an interesting thing because my friend and associate Rob Hand once wrote many years ago, he wrote, in traditional astrology, Saturn is reality and Neptune is illusion. Whereas we now realize Neptune may be reality and Saturn the illusion there is one. I say good things, but I don't say them as clever as Rob does, as cleverly. So Saturn is reality, Neptune is illusion, Neptune is dreams, Neptune is the distant shores of the ocean that are covered in fog. We can't see things. And when we can't see things on misty nights like a Halloween night when it's raining and misty and deep and dark, what happens? The imagination fills stuff in. We're taking a 10-second break. A tech break. Are we good? So here's the dance of all of November of 2015, building to a crescendo by the end of the month. The actual square date is exactly on November 26th. We'll work our way there in just a moment. But this square, because planets, not only Mercury, but planets from Earth's point of view go forward and backward and forward and backward, this square moves in and out of exactness through next late spring and summer. And this square, this dance between the planet of reality, Saturn, and the planet of dreams and illusions and imagination, Neptune, is a tricky one because Saturn is containment. You know, in the ancient alchemical philosophy, in order for things to change, to transmute, to transform, they had to be contained. And you've probably seen these old woodcuts of something in a glass with on a fire with these like long necks, like a retort. Do you know what I'm talking about? And these were the vessels that held the transmutation, which really was a metaphor for the transmutation of consciousness. They weren't talking about really turning lead into gold. They were talking about turning mundane consciousness into pure consciousness. Duh. Anyhow, the word for the container, regardless of its shape, was called an alembic, A-L-E-M-B-I-C. An alembic is the container that will contain an alchemical transformation. Saturn is the alembic. Saturn is the container. If you don't have a container, there's no reaction that occurs. It dissipates. And so even a commitment in a marriage is like an alembic. It's a container that holds the transformation. Neptune, squared by Saturn, is a leaky alembic. It's hard to know where the energy is dissipating, but it kind of fuzzes out the way it's held. And so what this means in our personal lives is that we all can look at areas in our lives, whether it's how we handle money, it's whether how we work with our kids or with our parents or with our lover or spouse or friends or employers or clients or whatever. It's where do we let that energy escape? Where in our lives can we employ Saturn to bring in more containment so we don't lose the power of the potential transformation? That's one way of it working. The other way of it working is there are many of us that are so fearful, so fearful of what might be beyond what we know is. We're so fearful of the unknown that we over-Saturnize. We're so, you know people, if it's not you, if no one here would admit that it's them, we all know someone in our life who has like a broom up their butt and can't move. You know who I'm talking about. Whoever it may be. Too much Saturn is not healthy because it stops the creative motion of life. We need animation. We need flexibility. We need movement. And with too much Saturn, we die. And so the flip side of this Saturn square Neptune is the use of imagination, Neptune, to break out of the overly rigid restraints of the rules and orders of Saturn. Are you with me here? Is this making sense? All right. So, we'll come back to this a little bit, but this is really, and I should say that this pair between rigid Saturn and totally loose Neptune, it can be a little bit daunting because it's hard to put your finger on it. Neptune's confusing. Why is Neptune confusing? Is confusion good or bad? I've probably said this on this stage before. A lot of words don't mean what we think they mean. Confusion comes from Greek. Con, with, fusion. What does fusion mean? Two things merging together. Confusion is two things merging together. What's wrong with that? Nothing unless you're an ego. See, because ego needs separateness. Ego is about survival. And so if there's no boundary between you and me, remember Saturn is boundary. If there's no boundary between you and me, I become confused. See how this works? So Neptune is confusing. This square between between Saturn and Neptune is in mutable or changeable signs. We just came off of this ongoing square between Uranus in Aries and Pluto in Capricorn. Aries and Capricorn are cardinal or season starting signs. Cardinal signs initiate. Mutable signs are the end of a cycle and they're ready to change to what's next. And this Saturn square Neptune is in mutable Sagittarius, which is the end of autumn moving to the beginning of winter. And Pisces is the end of winter moving toward the beginning of spring. And this will become something that we will talk about again over the next months, because Jupiter, which right now is in Virgo, moves forward and then it retrogrades back, and Jupiter lands by next spring in an exact square with Saturn and Neptune and Jupiter, and this pattern of what we know versus what we think we know, the illusions, the dreams, Neptune versus the reality, those things which are being set up this October and November and December will be playing through next June, July, August. So, let's come back to here and now and see what we got. We have a chart here for November 4th. We have the Sun and Mercury in Scorpio. Over the next weeks, Mercury will move through Scorpio faster than the Sun will line up with the Sun. Mercury lines up with the Sun when it's going direct or retrograde. If it's between the Earth and the Sun, it's retrograde. Or I should say, if it's retrograde, it's between the Earth and the Sun. If it's direct, it's on the far side of the Sun. This exact conjunction is... Where'd it go? I know it was right here. Sun, Mercury is on November 17th. But what's happening now is that Mercury moving closer and closer to the sun. Mercury is communication. It's our thoughts. It's our ideas. It's our intellect. The sun is our will. It's our consciousness. It's the thing that lights it all up. And as Mercury gets closer and closer to the sun, our words and our thoughts and our communication become more aligned with who we are. Something to be aware of that these next couple of weeks will continue to build. The other thing that we have going on is almost history. I talked about it last month in Bali, and that is that Venus and Mercury, which aligned back the beginning of this year and then over the summer again because of Venus's retrograde. Now Venus, if we back this up a few days, that Venus-Mercury, well, we can talk about it legally because it was on November 2nd, and that's within this month, even though it's already passed. So if we back this up just a couple of days, let's do this a couple of days, not a couple of hours. There we go. I'm sorry, what did I say? Venus-Mars, thank you. Thank you for that. So Venus normally moves faster than Mars, but because it retrograded, it moved faster than Mars, and then it retrograded, and it moved back across Mars, being retrograde. And now Venus again is moving faster than Mars, and you can see here on November 2nd, it goes Jupiter, then Venus, then Mars, and by the next day, Mars and Venus have swapped, and over the next weeks, Venus gains speed and moves away from the pack. But what this means is that we're still playing with a very highly creative energy here. This can be sexual, it can be intellectual, it's in Virgo, so it can be about things that we do that are service-oriented, which I guess can be sexual. I don't want to talk about it. But the fact here is that we've had, over these days, we've had this pileup of energy in Virgo, and then today, November 4th, and over the next couple of days, the moon sweeps through Virgo on the 5th and 6th. And as it does, it brings even more focus back to that. So it's just something to watch over the next couple of days as the moon does that. By the 8th, Venus, which is gaining speed, moves from Virgo into Libra, and here we get the first wave of what will become a deeper wave as Venus moves into Libra, followed by Mars, and eventually next year by slower moving Jupiter that spends a year in a sign. And remember earlier I said that the Uranus-Pluto square, even though it's over, it ain't over? Well, as each of these planets moves through Libra, they will be opposite Uranus and square Pluto, stirring that energy up again. We don't have that cooking this month, but we will talk about it again next month. So as this energy moves on, Venus in Libra, Venus likes being in Libra. Why? Every planet relates to a sign. Every sign relates to a planet. Venus relates to, like many planets do, to two signs. Taurus as a morning star and Libra as an evening star. Venus is at home in Libra. She likes being there because she can do her stuff, but it's not a physical, sensual Venus. It's a intellectual, beautiful Venus. It's Keats's Ode to a Grecian Urn. Truth is beauty, beauty is truth, truth beauty. That is all you know on earth and all you need to know. It's the idea in Libra. Venus in Libra it's the sign of the interior decorator. It's the sign of the artist wanting to put things in balance and have everything be in its proper place, both spatially and in color harmony, etc. And so as Venus moves into Libra, and she stays in Libra all the way through December 5th, when she moves into Scorpio, which changes the game. Come back next month, we'll talk about that. But as Venus moves into Libra, Venus is our desires. It's what we're attracted to. It's what we like. In Libra, what do we like? We like relationships. We like other people. We like the dance between self and other, between me and you, between Martin Buber's I and thou. Everything is in a relationship. Nothing stands by itself. And Venus loves those relationships while she's in Libra. The danger is that we can overlook some difficult things because Jeff used to say, I love having Libra clients because at the end of the session I say, how was the reading? And they go, well, how was it for you? It's a Libran energy. It's like the. This is going to sound worse than I intended, but it's the ultimate codependent sign. Libra always has the dance between self and other going on. So Venus moves into Libra on November 8th. Then we have on the 11th we have a new moon in Scorpio. The moon moves into Scorpio, catches up with Mercury and the sun. This is still a few days before the Mercury-Sun conjunction, which I said earlier was on November 17th. Thank you. So this is the week before that, but the moon, in just a few hours, sweeps across Venus and then lines up with the sun. Across Mercury and then lines up with the sun. What this means is that this new moon in Scorpio, which is about intensity of feeling, it's passion, it's the focus of emotion in the moment. But remember, emotion always has a precedent. And so all the water signs always bring the past into the present or project it into the future. In Scorpio, there's that sense of that passion being present in the given moment. And with Mercury there, what do we want to do with that passion? We want to talk about it. We want to have interaction. We want to relate. We want to learn about it. We want to read about it. We want to interact with it. So this Mercury conjuncting the new moon in Scorpio on November. It's on November 11th in the morning. This new moon is also harmonized with Chiron. You can see that the new moon is at about 18 degrees. Mercury is at about 15. Chiron is 17 degrees of Pisces. And I know we don't often talk about Chiron, but this new moon trining Chiron, Chiron the wounded healer, Chiron the planet having to do with the difficulty of feelings. It's about our wounded feeling function. And in a way, this new moon gives us an opportunity to use communication, to use Mercury, to send Mercury into the underworld, into the unconscious, to bring that information out of Scorpio, out of those hidden realms, out into the open, so we can talk about it where they don't have the power over us that they do when they're hidden. It's a very powerful new moon. As we move on, the following day, Mars leaves Virgo and enters Libra. Remember, I said Venus is moving faster than Mars, and first Venus moved into Libra on the 8th, and then Mars moves into Libra on the 12th. Mars stays in Libra all the way through January 3rd, and Mars in Libra is an interesting dance. Mars isn't thrilled about being in Libra. Why? Well, one of the ways you can tell in which what planets like or don't like being in a sign is that when a planet is in the sign that's opposite the normal sign that it rules, it's far away from home. Mars normally rules Aries, correct? So the opposite sign to Aries is Libra. Mars is not thrilled about being so far from the Aries home where it can kill and maim and be the god of war that it is. Heal. Mars is. Maybe. It can be the surgeon. Yeah, it's different than the healer, perhaps, but maybe. I mean, Mars is normally associated with metal that cuts. And it's normally, it's Mars the warrior. You don't ever hear Mars the healer. Chiron the healer, usually with wounded before healer, because most healers are, in fact, projecting the wounds that they have and salving them out there because they can't fix them in here. And by the way, a really good book about Chiron, which is not an astrology book, but it is, written by Robert Johnson, is called The Story of the Fisher King, which in some ways is the story of Chiron. And the subtitle of the book is something like The Wounded Feeling Function in Western Society. And so that's Chiron's domain. Mars, on the other hand, is assertive and directive and aggressive, and it's punchy and it's feisty and it's passionate. In Libra, though, Mars has to be nice. I think of a classic Libran as General President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had this just pleasant demeanor to him. But he was a 5-star general and an amazing tactician. He was not a person, perhaps, that would actually have a gun in his hand on the battlefield, but as directing the Allied forces in World War II, to some extent, he strategized the winning of the war. Mars in Libra is like a chess or go master. I recall a quote that says, chess is the greatest waste of human intelligence in the world outside of an advertising agency. Nevertheless, one can be incredibly assertive and aggressive and warlike behind a chess match. Or in martial arts. Martial arts. Mars, Venus. Do you see that? Do you hear that? Venus is art, Mars is war. Martial arts is Mars in Libra. It's being a warrior, but doing it in a manner that has to do with right movement and even beauty. And in fact, I think of the book The Art of War, which is a very well-known, famous Chinese classic that in some ways still comes back to that concept of Mars in Libra. It's about fighting, but not necessarily just impulsively hitting someone back. It's about winning because one is taking the time to figure out that delicate balance. The balance beams, Libra, the balance between self and other. So we have Mars moving into Libra on November 12th. We have then the Mercury-Sun conjunction on the 17th, and you can see how Mercury flips from one side of the Sun to the other. That's on the 17th. On the 18th, we have slow-moving Neptune, which has been retrograde, turns direct. There are a lot of astrologers who put a lot of stock in the retrograde and direct cycle of the outer planets. I feel they're important when they hit points in your chart or when they're hit by other faster-moving planets. But it's almost like if you're driving your car 40 miles an hour and you throw it into reverse, you're going to know it. That's Mercury. It's the fastest moving of the planets. When it goes into retrograde, you know it. Neptune, Pluto, though, it's like being in a car moving a quarter of a mile an hour or a day. And then when it goes into reverse, you might not notice it. Now, granted, it still may have an impact, and that impact may be very subtle. And in homeopathy, sometimes the most subtle things can be the most important. So I'm not saying that they don't work, another double negative. But I am saying that the movement of the station of Neptune on the 18th and its beginning of its direct cycle may not be noticed that day, but it does play into the fact that Saturn will still catch up to the square to Neptune when it's moving direct, and we will feel that energy build over the days ahead. Okay. The next major event that we have, which isn't that major, but it's noticeable, is that on the 20th, Mercury moves out of Scorpio and into Sagittarius. Now, here we get Mercury as the role it sometimes plays when it's ahead of the sun. It's like the early warning system. Remember, on the 22nd, the sun moves into Sagittarius. There it is, right there. So going from the 19th to the 20th to the 21st, Mercury, and then the 22nd, the sun. Over those few days, we have Mercury and the sun moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, which is normally uplifting, and we go into denial about all those things we were worried about the previous month, Halloween, and instead we start thinking about the holidays and the uplifting and the upcoming travel and the wonderful, all this. But we have a problem this year, and that problem is Saturn. Because as the planets, as Mercury and the sun move into Sagittarius, they're immediately within range of sobering, serious, karmic, you get what you deserve Saturn. Now, this doesn't have to be bad. It's just not the regular uplifting Sagittarius that we're normally used to. So it's my suggestion that this Thanksgiving may be a little bit different than some other recent ones you remember. There just may be more responsibility involved, maybe some more weighty energy that is not negative. It's just different than the normal taste of the turkey. That was poetic. So both Mercury and the sun move into Sagittarius, and then on the 24th, Mercury catches up with Saturn, and then on the 29th, the sun catches up with Saturn. So can you see that? I'm going to play that through again so that you can see here that first we have Saturn here on the 22nd, just moved into Sagittarius at 0 Sag. We have Mercury at 2 Sag, and then we have Saturn at 6. And as we move this a day at a time, there's Mercury catching up with Saturn, now Mercury on the other side of Saturn, and now the sun catching up with Saturn on the 28th, and on the 29th, and on the 30th, it's on the other side. So it's my suggestion that the end of this month, as these planets are lining up with Saturn, we're going to get a little bit more weight, a little bit more karmic stuff going on in our lives, things coming round that are not quite as easy as they might be. And in fact, each of these planets, first Mercury on the 24th, and then the sun on the 29th, and in fact, even Saturn right in there, are one by one, not only conjuncting Saturn, but Saturn will be squaring Neptune. Remember that? And so one by one, they will each square Neptune. And so this is kind of the culminating piece of the month, is this energy of the dance between what is real and what is in our imaginations. We're on one of those 5-second in between the rolls break. Okay, in the midst of all of this, I'm backing it up just a few days to the 5th. And let's move this ahead an hour at a time so we can get to. That's good. On the 25th, we have the full moon in Gemini, Gemini being the opposite sign to Sagittarius. So we have this cluster of the sun and Saturn and Mercury all in Sagittarius, giving us more responsibilities, weighing down. We have the dream, we have the journey. Sagittarius is about the 5-year or the 30-year plan in our lives. It's about the where we want to go and the what we want to do. It's about making that come true by making a plan. Saturn says, make the plan, bring it down to earth, make it manageable. And then we have the moon whizzing from Taurus for a few days where it's kind of steady, and it goes into Gemini, and when the moon goes into Gemini, it's all over the map. Our thoughts are all over the map. We're restless. All of a sudden, that trip to to Tibet or to Africa or for the PhD doesn't sound as much fun as going to Reno for the weekend skiing or whatever you do. because that moon in Gemini kind of brings up the instantaneous noise and distractions. And Gemini is like, it's the mercurial fast, and what's going on here, and oh, that looks like fun, and what about that? And meanwhile, there's the weight of all this long distance stuff. And full moons are often culminations. But what's interesting of the previous new moon, but what's interesting is that the previous new moon was in Scorpio. And that was about an emotional communication. And now all the energy has switched to Sagittarius, but it still has weight. And the moon in Gemini is just wanting to connect dots. It's not interested in the big picture. The big picture. It's not interested in the long haul. It's not interested in how it's going to get there. So I think that this moon, this full moon on November 25th, which is the day before Thanksgiving, is a bit difficult because we can't find a place to balance our long-range commitments with what we would like to be doing. It's like we all have to go to Mom or Dad's for Thanksgiving on Thursday, and we don't want to because there's a good party down at Susie's or Joe's or someplace. And so it's that dance between what we want to do and perhaps what we must do. And I think this dance that builds through the end of the month is the flavor of this deeper, what I'm calling the mutable issue. The mutable meaning the change, the adaptations we need to make at this phase in our life. And I want to add in here, I want to add the moon, the lines back to the moon. I think this will do it. That didn't do it. Let's try this. Aspected points. Let's try that. All right. So now we can see that the Sun, Saturn, and Mercury in mutable Sagittarius, squaring Neptune in mutable Pisces, being squared by the full moon in mutable Gemini. And although Jupiter's past all of this by degrees, Jupiter is in mutable Virgo, but Jupiter turns retrograde and comes back into that point next spring. And so this, in some way, this full moon, I believe, is very important in setting up the dilemmas that we're working with over the next 6 months or so that have to do with how we're adapting to the new land. What do I mean by that? So the cardinal T-squares from 2010 through 2015, 2013 through 2015, really kind of pushed us all into someplace different than where we were. It's like the energy shifted during that period of time, culturally, socially, relationship-wise, economically, however they impacted you. Those changes, although there still may be ramifications, those changes are largely over. Largely. It's almost like the earthquake has occurred. But if you live in Haiti or in Nepal and you've had an earthquake recently, you ain't done with it. The event may be over, but it's impacting your life month by month, day by day, hour by hour, because you're having to deal with the adjustments that you need to make living in this land that's very different than the land that you were living in a few years ago. So I think herein lies the seed to the lesson that many of us will have over the weeks and months and even 6-8 months ahead. And that has to do with this mutable square that goes on and off between Saturn and Neptune, with other planets next spring moving through Gemini here, and Jupiter moving through. Actually, I'm going to jump this forward really, really quickly just so you can see how dramatic this is, because this becomes a very, very key point. Let me just go back here. Aspect set planets and go back to simple. Doo-doom. And now we want to go ahead to a week at a time. And there we go, right in there. All right. So we're looking at the end of May, beginning of June. Did someone just die? So what we're looking at the end of May, beginning of June, is now we can see, although the degrees are different, we can see Saturn again squaring Neptune with, now here we have Venus and the Sun, Mercury will come into it, but Jupiter, and again though it's the same dilemma of the mutability, of the adaptability, of the need to change to the new lay of the land. And so I really think, coming back to the present moment, that we have this sense of how this energy through the end of November will actually be setting up this much deeper pattern that has to do with how we view Saturn, responsibilities, our goals that we are calculated, our plan to reach those goals, to get to those places, and Neptune, the dreams that may not have a plan attached, but they just may have that sense of fantasy and illusion and dream. And it's how do we dance with the two of these without going too much to the fearful base Saturn side. Pull in, make it real, get that commitment, make the commitment, sign the contract, do what you have to do, form the, do the routines. That's all Saturn. That's great, but if you do it so much, then you lose the dream and you lose the imagination. On the other hand, if you go off the other side and you're just drinking and smoking and dreaming and meditating and going to retreats, you lose the practical Saturn side. So I think that this month is somewhat a dance between these two energies, and I think it's important as we move through the month, whatever the issues we face individually, to bring those issues back. Bring them back to this question of what's dream, what's reality, how can I find this balance between these two energies that are really not balanced, so that I can make the most out of the dreams and illusions and imagination, and at the same time make the most out of Saturn, the reality of I get what I've worked for, the hard work that I've put in actually is rewarded. Another month, another $50. What's that saying? Another day, another dollar? It doesn't seem like enough anymore, does it? Thank you all. Thank you, Soul Food. Thank you, baristas. And we appreciate you guys. And I always end by reminding everyone here that Soul Food, actually, this space is free for you tonight. I donate my time, and the way that you can keep these kinds of events going is to do your shopping here. Instead of going to the big department store down the block, vote with your dollar bill. It's not just a matter of sending in your votes in the mail like we hopefully did yesterday. But buy the extra cup of coffee before the bar closes, and do some shopping here. Let them know that you're around. Show your appreciation and your thanks. We will take about a 10 or 15 minute break. We will come back and someone will draw 3 names. If you want your chart to be one that's looked at, we'll look at 3 different charts and look at some of the things coming up for those people. Put your name, your birth date, place, and time, birth date, place, and time, and your email address, if I don't already have your email, on a piece of paper, and put them on that table under where Julie's butt is right now, but wait until her butt moves, please. And we'll pick 3 of them. We'll look at charts afterwards. In closing, just reminding you again, Austin, the week before Thanksgiving, and Brighton-Bush the first week of January 8th, 9th, 10th. And that will close out at a maximum. So if you're interested, you want to make sure you get in there. And see you next month. Thank you all.